I'm just going to move into the examen. And remember, examen just simply means to review my experience. Like the full title is often an examination of consciousness, is the name of a classic Jesuit paper on the examen. But it just simply means to review, to look at, to evaluate, to weigh up, sitting back from and looking at my experience. So these are the steps. The first one is see it as a gift. Remember, gratitude, that thing we just did, that practice. And this is the key one. And Timothy Gallagher is really good on this. You have to get the gratitude first. If you don't do that, the rest of it doesn't make sense, because gratitude, consolation, seeing things that God sees it. And often the desolation can be so strong that it tries to influence the way you see things. So you have to almost bring yourself to consolation. You have to fight off the temptation to be negative, to be ungrateful, in order to get here first. And they say sometimes just get yourself into gratitude is enough. Just the first step is enough sometimes. Second step, ask for God's help. And that's the petition there. I mean, again, it sounds obvious, but there's this Jesuit technique from the spiritual exercises, and it just simply says, ask for what you want. Like, put it into the form of a prayer, and it has an extraordinary effect. You know, regardless of how I feel or regardless of what's going on, just simply formulate it into a prayer. You know, God, help me see this day accurately. Help me to see where your footprints have been. Help me to get through this crisis. Help me to make better decisions. The third thing then is to reflect on the day, to look back over the whole day. I often say to people, it's a bit like looking at a movie. The key thing about a movie is you can take yourself out of the picture and look at it a little bit impersonally, as if you were someone else looking at it. And then the other key thing is to look at it with Christ, obviously, to see it through Christ's eyes, because that looks different. So instead of, sometimes we can be very judgmental and harsh on ourselves, sit back a little bit. How would God see this, you know? And see the, you know, the ups and downs, the light and the darkness. There's always a whole lot of textures to a day. Again, try not to judge yourself. Try to sit back, review, see it, filter it. And that's the key thing. Then the separation, remember we looked at this slide before, panning for gold, sifting for those important moments, those things that are really valuable, and separating out the dross or the difficult stuff or the stuff that's not worth hanging on to. That can take a little bit of time, especially if there's something really complicated, difficult, emotionally challenging. Sometimes they can be really difficult, and sometimes you have to sit with those, and you have to pray with those. You have to ask for light and work your way through. But there's always a way through stuff, and there's always an insight to be had, I find. And God always responds. God always gives us some light. Sometimes you have to hang in there a bit, and you have to resist the temptation of desolation or writing stuff off, or just assuming there's no meaning in things. Remember that things have meaning, things have a direction. Number 4, ask for forgiveness or healing. So this is key. The reason we do this, obviously, is to hand those things over to God, things we can't resolve or mistakes we've made, and to let those things be healed and to move on, right? Not to live perpetually in the past, not to be completely caught up in stuff or mistakes we've made. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about learning, processing, accepting, giving things to God, but also renewing ourselves, making a decision, deciding not to make the same mistakes, deciding to change things, deciding to get help, deciding to redo a relationship, deciding to put in boundaries, for example, deciding to step back, deciding to get counseling. Courageous decisions in line with God's will. That's where consolation. Remember, consolation means going towards God. Doesn't mean having a great time or feeling good about things. It's not about the feelings. It's about what's going to bring me closer to God. And sometimes those are tough decisions. It can be tough at the time, but ultimately rewarding, ultimately bring me to the light and bring me to God. This is just a little review of the examen, the 5 steps from Timothy Gallagher's book. We spoke about this last week. It's a really good book on the examen. I can send this slide around. You don't have to take this down, but just note the 5 points: gratitude, petition, review, forgiveness, renewal. And finally, this is a website where you can have a look at examine the technique online there. So I'm just coming up, that's just the end of my